Old World Colorado Springs, the Garden of the Gods. Short-lived home of Nikola Tesla. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Those of you familiar with this channel will know that we are seeking alternative explanations other than those provided to us by the conventional historians, the uniformitarians of the 1800s. And so we'll begin this video with Tesla. I am trying to awaken the energy contained in the air. These are the main sources of energy. What is considered as empty space is just a manifestation of matter that is not awakened. And we are seeking explanations for past resets. We're looking at the geography through the lens of catastrophism, where something happened here in a much shorter period of time than has been laid out to us through academia. And all of these formations we're seeing are in the greater Colorado Springs area, a true wealth of evidence that something went on here that defies explanation within the bounds of what we have been given as geography and history. So on that note, let's take a look at Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs, just south of Denver, which has been featured on this channel. I encourage you to check that video out. And you're going to see all sorts of geographical formations from the surrounding area. Many taken from Garden of the Gods here. Working our way up into Manitou Springs and some of the archaeological remains in the area, but most of what we're looking at will be in the Colorado Springs area, so we're going to be jumping back and forth from buildings to geography. And a quick look at the population demographics shows us that there's been quite a bit of growth here in the last 50 years in Colorado Springs. When we look back into 1900 and in and around that area, not a lot of people, around 20,000, 30,000 by 1910, we're told. Not a lot of growth between 1910 and 1920, as you can see here, but much of the buildings we're going to be looking at will have been said to have been constructed in this time period. In the early days of Colorado Springs, looking much like Denver, having to do with the Pikes Peak Gold Rush, and then being used as a tuberculosis retreat. The dry air of the region was used as a healing source, I suppose you could say, for people suffering from tuberculosis at the time. So tourism actually kicks up quite a bit in that area. Here we're looking at the Garden of the Gods, an old photograph from 1890, very early time period. Very interesting formations, geographical anomalies, really, often ridiculous explanations by conventional history or geography to explain these types of structures. Very interesting. We'll look at much of the architecture now in the region. And again, remember, most of these are coming from that early time period where there's only really several thousand people there. We start with the St. Francis Hospital, and in our Old World explorations we're looking for signs of what we consider to be the Old World civilization. So we're looking for the tops of the buildings with ornamental antiquitech, what we might say. We're looking for basement windows in a very early time period indicating potential evidence of a mud flood. And we're looking at intricate stone and brickwork that defies possibility of for what was able to be done for that time period. And you have this ragtag bunch here out front, and we look behind them and you can see the type of architecture that was evident at the time. And we do have a railroad tycoon character, William Jackson Palmer, connected with the Colorado Springs area. The founder of the town, builder of several railroads, including the D and RGW. Seems like a typical narrative that we find across the states to explain the growth for many of these small towns at that time period. And many of the areas in Colorado Springs named after this character. And a very important note, Colorado Springs named after the numerous hot springs in the surrounding area. Now, if you followed my research in the meltology field, where we have an alternative explanation for geography and post-cataclysm world, where much of the circuit board Earth was fried in cataclysm. What we find with these old hot springs is possibly the remains of the plumbing systems for these old structures, or this old infrastructure. I know it sounds far-fetched for many people that aren't familiar with this research, but this is what we are looking into here on this channel. Nevertheless, very interesting visuals. Really sparks the imagination when we look at this type of geology. And here we have what supposedly is the Native Americans from the region that inhabited these lands for many thousands of years and dressed in such a fashion. So I do have my doubts. A lot of this narrative springing up from the World's Fairs, I suggest, where we are presented a false version of history. And here's one of the sanitariums at the time. You can see this intricate stonework on these structures, and you have to wonder, with such a small population, why would you build in such a fashion? This stonework looking very old, especially for the time period that such a photo was taken. You would think there'd be more of a newness, let's say, to the visual. So just looking around now at the surrounding area as we get into the Manitou cliff dwellings. And this is very interesting. It's privately owned, and it's a replica of ancestral Puebloan cliff dwellings. Reconstructed in 1904, opened to the public in 1907. Very interesting. Seems a bit silly to me, that narrative. How else would you explain such structures in the region? And then, of course, they're going to tell us the timeline here of when these people lived in the area, and they would have constructed buildings in such a fashion using the geography that's been around for millions of years, they will tell us. I'll also point you to a video I did on the Four Corners. You can see here they're highlighting that on the Wikipedia page, where I speculate much more about this cataclysm. And looking much like the remains we see in Mesa Verde area and other areas of the Four Corners, I suspect these were not recreations, but I think we're looking at what remained, what we call pockets of survival, left over from a cataclysm that occurred here. Some of it may be reconstructions, I'm sure. They go in and spruce these places up and make them accessible to tourists and sort of blend the fabrication with what once existed, but I suggest that a lot of this is remains of a previous civilization that was extinguished in cataclysm, but did leave evidence for us to observe, I suppose. Very interesting rock formation here. You have to wonder, has this been sitting like this for millions of years? That's what uniformitarianism will tell you. Or is this just the leftovers from a fairly recent cataclysm? And when you begin to look into this research, it starts to become very pattern-like across the realm. One picture might not do it enough, one location might not do it enough for you, but as you look at more and more across the realm, you're going to see the patterns emerge. We're looking at a nice street scene of Colorado Springs. The Antlers house over here. Alta Vista Hotel. Some nice old world structures. You can see the brickwork and the arches here. Keep moving. Another look again at those Manitou Springs. Archaeological reconstruction, we will be told. Alright, this would be a hospital in the area. I don't have the name for it, apologies. You see all the evidence of rock walls here. So the assumption has to be made that they were just building rock walls everywhere back in the late 1800s, in between the time they were gold mining, I suppose. There's so much work involved, there's a reason why we don't do that. I know we pour concrete as well these days, but the amount of work it would take to stack stone like that, especially with excavations, is one of the reasons why this alternative field of research has popped up. And we will see several churches in this area as well. And of course we have some very interesting high schools. The stack jumps out at me on this one, looking like maybe octagonal brick stack here. You have the cupola in the middle, or at the top, at the peak. The Alamo Hotel, looking very old world, looking more like something I would expect in the American Midwest. We'll take a look at some of the other features here. You can see the coffered ceilings and the intricate and ornate woodwork. You can barely make it out the detail above the fireplace here. Let's go back here, and this would be the entry to that hotel, the Alamo Hotel. So again, reminding me of more of what I've seen in the American Midwest, I would say. Looking and feeling quite old, especially for that early time period as well. So this is the Antler Hotel. Bit of a confusing, or Antlers Hotel, bit of a confusing narrative because we're going to see several structures. They have the fire story wrapped in with this, and the reason why we're seeing several of them. This is interesting, the landscaping going on here. There's a view from the front. You can see the train, the rail lines here. So Colorado Springs having the rail system, or the trolley car system, fully intact. What we have suggested in this field of research, that it is a part of the infrastructure of the old world that was erased with modern internal combustion engine, and of course the robber barons that brought all that into play. Here's the front entry of that hotel. So again, you're seeing the intricate stonework and the difficulty and the time that would have been taken to build in such a manner. Defying explanation, really. And the previous version, this is the side view of the same structure. And there you get a good sense of that, what we might call post-cataclysm mud flood, flow of mud. Some people call it building ash. So all sorts of options are on the table, not really ruling much out. It's just worth pondering on. I think that something more has gone on here than we have been told. A nice view of the colonnade at that hotel. Looks like a really nice place to have a cup of coffee and smoke from the pipe. And there we have the Antlers Inn, looking like a previous incarnation, probably a different location, but you can see the stonework down below here, and the circular turret features on the front here, very difficult, but some interesting features on the roof here. You can see the spires coming off the peaks here, but these are new to me. I haven't seen a lot of these. Must have to do with possibly air circulation exchange. Not sure. If you have any comments, please add them. And yet another version, we are told of the Antlers Hotel or Inn. So it does get a little bit confusing, doesn't it? But you can see again the stonework all looking like it's sort of blended in as one. beginning to look like a single material rather than stone stacked, I find, which is interesting. And this is a nice shape here with the tech on top. Conventional history will tell us this is a weather vane, but we suggest there's more to the story. Could this be the rear view of that same structure? Possibly. You can see those along the ridge. Those along the ridge, but I'm not seeing anything else. So, a bit confusing there. Interesting nonetheless. The city auditorium is still there. A bit of a grainy photo, but this is an immense structure for just a small town here in Colorado for early 1900s. And these types of structures really don't fit the narrative. Very interesting tech on top here as well. This is the Bemis Hall College. Of course, correct me if I have the pronunciation wrong, as many of you locals like to do. I'm no expert on the region, just trying to bring you my ideas and many of the visuals. This is the Broadmoor Hotel. Photograph looking very similar to many of the construction photographs I've seen across the states. They're giving us a date here in 1918. You can see the rail lines, and I'm not exactly sure what's going on, if this is a reconstruction of the front area. This looking well established and old, not looking like a new build at all. Very interesting tech here again on top. Let's look at the interior of this. Now, at first glance, very difficult to tell that what we've got going on here with the walls looks to be stonework, very, very smooth and precise stonework. I wasn't sure at first, and I'm still not completely sure if we're looking at some sort of wallpapering or covering, or that this is actually intricately stacked stonework. And you can see it here on the walls too. Here, this is probably it. But even difficult to tell. If anyone's been in this hotel, you can add a little more texture to the story, shed a little light on it. I certainly appreciate it. But it looking like stonework to me. And you can see the detailing here on the corners of the openings. Some ceiling details, very, very intricate for the 19 teens in Colorado Springs. Remember, there was very little growth going on between 1910 and 1920 population-wise. So you really do have to wonder about much of this. And the reset narrative, I think, comes into play. There you can see very perfectly. I think it is stone, because you can see this one, the keystone of the arch, bulging out a little more. Very intricate work, very precise, and very, very detailed. The Broadmoor Hotel, Colorado Springs. So we do have the college nearby, providing us with several old world structures. This is the science building. Yet another building. Not sure which one it is, but you can see the stonework there. First Baptist Church. Very early time period. Very difficult to build such a structure here. Suggestion is that these structures were there, and the inheritors of the New World, or of the Old World, which became the New World, were repurposing many of the old structures that were found dead. The St. Francis Hospital and Chapel. So several hospitals, really, and I guess this ties in with the tuberculosis theme for the area as an explanation. But you have to wonder again at the construction methods and why they were built in such a manner. Sanitarium. Nice look here at early Colorado Springs with all the red brick features in the downtown core. Horse and buggy. Many churches, so many of these towns and cities riddled with churches that would have taken a very, very large amount of time to construct. in that early time period. Even modern day, these would be very, very difficult undertakings. And I have posited that many of these tower-like structures that we find on these old church buildings once had more of a peak or a dome on top, and they have been decapitated, for lack of a better word. We have the Elks evident in Colorado Springs. Again, an old world structure repurposed into a hotel. And you can see here again the basement windows and the blockwork lower down, and we have some ornamentation along the ridge, or along the roof line, let's say. And we have all the old steam train infrastructure. Probably had to be patched back together. Interesting, this one. The verticality of that, I find interesting. Old public library. A school for the deaf and blind. This one dating way back into Colorado Springs history, I think 1870s, I believe. They'll tell us that this was originally constructed, which seems very early. Faced some fire issues early on. Let's say 1950 here. Interesting part of the narrative for the deaf and blind, eh? Is that us? Interesting that they would specialize in that and have these structures built for that particular purpose in such a small location. The old county jail. Alright, let's get to the old courthouse. And all we're told of this is that it was built in 1903. We don't have a time frame. It is now used as a museum. Beautiful structure. You can see the familiarity of the front entrance, the lower entrance, and the above entrance with the stairs. The tower, central tower with the dome cupola on top. I'm ticking old world boxes for us here. Let's take a closer look at that dome. So 1903, Colorado Springs, 20,000 people living there, and they were building like this, we will be told. I have my doubts, of course, this is why I have the channel. Some of interior shots of that building, just to give you a sense of the finish work that went on the interior. Here's the front entry, looking very grand. This looking like it's been made blank for some reason. I'm sure there was something there before. But no shortage again of arches, columns, coffered ceilings, detail, intricate detail, very intricate old world detail. There's some of the balustrade, beautiful balustrade. Very interesting how it's worked right into there. Fantastic. That's the courthouse. This is looking like a high school. Well, it is a high school. I don't know if it's looking like a high school. That's what it's being used for. The Cutler Hall. The old City Hall. Again, you have that, all of those old world features popping out at you here in Colorado Springs. Not a large place, remember, at the turn of the century. So if they're building structures like this in 1891, so this would be a town of 11 or 12,000 people, and they have the ability to construct in such a manner with these building materials and getting all the materials to these locations. It's quite a feat, really. Quite the expectation for us to believe all of it. This is the Hidden Inn. It's no longer there, we're told. If you're local, maybe you know a bit more about that. But I suggest or suspect that there's something going on here, and it was repurposed into the Hidden Inn, and that maybe that there was some infrastructure, pockets of survival that have been used in this manner. That's my speculation. Of course, you need a high school that's built like this. And I wish I had more information on this. Apparently, this is where the new Palmer High School is. But it doesn't make sense. They think about this town, 150-year-old town. They built a structure like this early on, and they had to demolish it within that time period. This is a grand structure. Absolutely absurd to think that you would need to demolish such a structure, except for the fact that maybe you're trying to hide the past, which is a large reason why we speculate on these things. Here we go, 1893. And the photograph taken in 1901. So at a time when there was about 12,000 people living there, they're building all sorts of brick structures with lower levels or basements, and high schools like this. What do you think? Is this believable to you? It's not to me, but you can believe what you want. We have an incline rail situation. Very interesting. That's that Manitou incline. You see this across North America as well in the early time periods in some of these towns. I think it's Ivywild School, 1917, early time period. No growth going on, remember. Why are you building schools when nobody's moving there? There's no population growth really between 1910 and 1920, comparatively. This is all I could find for the temple, but obviously their presence was obviously there. 1909, early time period again. Very ornately designed or decorated. Just a quick shot of that location. Of course, you had to have an opera house for the gold miners that were really into listening to opera. Very cultured. And here's a depiction of what the interior of that opera house may have looked like. Even the depiction is quite breathtaking, I would suggest. Would love to have seen what that looked like in the interior. So we saw this one earlier. This is actually known as Montezuma's Temple. A lot of the language surrounding a lot of these monuments I find interesting, possibly a hat tip to what we're actually seeing. Some of the mountains nearby are named castles, and like this one is temple. So it makes me think of the whole Grand Canyon narrative, which is being investigated thoroughly by independent researchers these days. Much more to the story of the Grand Canyon than we have been told. And I don't have the name for this structure, but it's a nice little scene. Old world scene with the rail cars and the early automobiles and the horse and buggy, just to give you a sense of what was firmly entrenched in Colorado Springs early on. Looking like a very early hospital. This is a good photo as well, just to show you how bleak the surrounding area of the structure was. This structure looking like it's grown over around it, and the fact that these windows are right down at the ground level makes you think that there's a good chance that this was surrounded by mud, and then this is just overgrowth from that time period. So not really a long time period, I think, between that cataclysm and the repurposing of these structures. Maybe 100, 150 years. Of course, that's all speculation, but you can see the tech on top. Very interesting. Beautiful structure. St. Mary's Cathedral. You had to have a cathedral early on in Colorado Springs. And there it is in the modern day. Looking like a place to get married, of course. Why wouldn't you? Beautiful structure. Pristine brickwork, too. Not a lot of aging goes on with this quality of construction. So you hear a lot of the narrative where these were torn down because they were falling apart. My BS detector goes off when I hear those stories. I don't believe it. Now we're coming to the climax of this video. The printer's home, the Union printer's home. but I'm going to hold off a little longer before we get into that. Let's look at the mining exchange. Again, we see these all in these gold rush town areas. If it's not a gold rush area, it will be an agricultural exchange, something like that, depending on the area, but I think they're repurposing these structures of the old world. The Burns Theater. Now, if you could take off all the modern day signage, you could probably get a decent look at what the front of that looks like. And here's some of the interior. You can see the painting. Who did the painting in Colorado Springs? Anyone have a name for whoever's attributed to this work here? Here you get a sense of the immense stonework, the shiny columns, and you really have to wonder, who are they telling us did this work? And we have the setting of the narrative, of course, again. You can see the ornamentation of the old world. Okay, this is the Tut Library at the college. Very, very intricate stonework, brickwork, old world. Not what you would expect in such a location, really. All right, the printer's home. And it's looking like construction of this structure went on at the same time period. They were building the school and the early 1890s. So in that time period, so many structures going up at this time. They must have had a lot of skilled craftsmen, tradesmen on hand to build these structures in the 1890s. And there's a look at how immense the structure really is, and just a quick look from a local news outlet, CPR. I'll put the link in the description. They're looking to reinvigorate this structure. You can see the modern day, the texture of the construction here. Remember 1890s, 130-year-old history, 1892. They're looking to revitalize it. Of course, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to do it. Certainly won't be able to reproduce what was there. You can see the costing here, 500 to 600 million. And we'll just search around just to give you a few more looks at this beauty. And I ask you again, does this look like something you expect to see in Colorado Springs in the 1890s? So built as a tuberculosis treatment center, of course, just like the sanitarium and hospitals and all of those. They had to quickly construct these buildings so they could treat people with tuberculosis at the time in that beautiful, dry mountain air of Colorado Springs. Of course, I doubt this was built quickly, and I doubt it was built in 1892. Alright, a few more photos as we come to the end of the file. I hope you've enjoyed this look at Colorado Springs. This is the Will Rogers Memorial Shrine nearby, because you have to have what looks like the remains of a castle on the top of a mountain in Colorado Springs. One of those anomalies that make you scratch your heads. These are some guests of the sanatorium. No doubt gentlemen suffering from tuberculosis looking to be cured. Is that what's going on here? Or is there more of a gentleman's club gathering feel to this photo? You tell me what you think. I am the doubter of the official narrative, so you know that to be true. The old YMCA. Always seeing the YMCA near the end of our files. And of course a YWCA as well, not to be outdone. Alright, thank you for joining me at in this look at Colorado Springs. Until next time.